Paul says that, first, the first bullet point. Paul says that when we live this way, right, live by fulfilling ourselves, or live by meeting the needs of others instead of meeting our own needs. Paul says that when we do this, we're fulfilling the law of Christ. The law of Christ, I go on to say in these bullet points, the law of Christ is the law written on our hearts that Jeremiah promised would come with new covenant. So far, this doesn't sound like this is a strong contrast, but listen up. Let me keep reading, and you'll quickly see that this is the case. The next bullet point says that these laws are found on our heart and directed by the Holy Spirit. That's why I can't give you a list of the law of Christ, right? People will say the law of Moses is a list, but the law of Christ, there isn't a list that you can write down because it's found on our heart. Notice these are some of the differences that people start to highlight in their understanding of the law of Christ. The law of Christ can be summarized, though, because Jesus did it for us, right? This is another way of describing the law of Christ. It's summarized because Jesus did it for us. In other words, Paul can summarize it because it's something that Jesus did. We don't have to have Moshe demonstrating it for us. It's something that Jesus did instead. This law replaces the law of Moses. There it is in black and white. That's basically the traditional Christian interpretation of the law of the law of Christ. It replaces the law of Moses. In other words, the law of Moses had its use, it had its dispensation, it had its time, but it gave way in the fullness of time, in the unfolding of God's progressive revelation to mankind. The law of Moses ran its course, and then the law of Christ came and overtook the law of Moses, so to say, and therefore the law of Moses was brought to an end. That administration came to a close, and the law of Christ sprang to reality, and that is now the dispensation, or the time period that we live in now is this dispensation of grace, where we as believers live by the law of Christ, not by the old dispensation of the law of Moses. All right, that's of course again traditional Christian theology. Let's keep reading. This is why we say that Christians still live by rules and standards, right? We do have a rule according to this theology, but those standards aren't found in reading the Ten Commandments or any other part of the law of Moses. You've probably heard this before in traditional Christian circles, and you've probably heard it taught upon in even in Messianic circles, that this is a traditional Christian position, that it's not the standards of Moses that we're to uphold, it's the standards of Christ that we're upholding. Let's keep going. Our flesh loves to see things written in black and white, right? That's why perhaps maybe pastors will say that people gravitate towards the Ten Commandments, or why perhaps maybe these Messianics, speaking as a traditional Christian, why these Messianics, people like me, why we're drawn to the law of Moses is because humanly speaking, or right, psychologically speaking, our flesh loves things that are written in black and white. Okay. This list goes on to say that, but in His wisdom, God chose to write His law in blood on our hearts where we can't see it. Notice again the contrast between what's written on pages versus what's written in our hearts by the blood of Messiah, the law of Christ. All right? And then the final bullet point, top of page 175, from this source that I'm going to reveal here in a moment, is instead, we can only follow Him in spirit and truth if we follow Him at all. Right? We no longer serve according to the letter, but we serve according to the Spirit. If we read, what is it, in Corinthians, I think it's 2 Corinthians chapter 3, I believe, where Paul talks about it's not by the letter that we serve, but by the Spirit that we serve. It's no longer, we don't serve God according to the letter, but according to the Spirit. I think that's also repeated in somewhere in the Apostolic Scriptures in a different spot. But let's look at my footnote 163. I pulled those bullet points from Verse by Verse Ministries, commentary to the book of Galatians. And their website is www.versebyverseministry.org. So you can go there and check it out and see if I misquoted or if I caught the context correctly. And if I misrepresented Verse by Verse Ministries, feel free to drop me an email and let me know that I misrepresented them and tell me where I need to correct myself, okay? All right, let's keep reading my own commentary.